Let me explain a little bit about what we're going to do today. We have a couple of extra songs. We're going to break up the message into a couple different pieces, and there's a reason for that. You'll see. If I'm really honest with you, and I try to be, I attempt to be, I would tell you that up until last week, I really didn't know what we were going to do in January. I knew what we were going to do February through like December, but I had no idea what we were going to do in January. And the reason is because I was just in this constant battle of not feeling well prepared to communicate about the things that I felt God was placed on my heart to communicate with you. Does that make sense? So this is what happened. I start this journey last fall because a friend says, here, you've got to read this book. And I read this book, and it's all about the soul. All right? Now, the soul is a word we use. We sing a lot of songs. We read a lot of the Psalms, and it talks about soul. But, man, when I tried to understand what the soul was, I don't have a clue. I mean, I've got ideas and I've got concepts, and I think I understand what a soul is, but I really don't understand what a soul is. You know what I mean? And we're even going to sing songs today that has the word soul in it. And so as I go down this journey, I'm thinking, man, I feel like God really wants us to talk about the soul in January. But I kept saying, I don't know anything about the soul. How can I talk about something I don't know anything about? So the pastors and I, we go up to this conference, and we're at this conference in Seattle. I'm not kidding you. The main speaker, his mom died, and so he wasn't able to be at this conference we were at. So the guest speaker gets up, and guess what he talks about? The soul. And I'm sitting here, I'm going, okay, what do you want me to talk? I don't know anything about the soul. And so as I go down this journey, I'm reading this book. I'm still dealing and wrestling and knowing that this is where I think God wants us to go. But I'm still saying, I'm ill-equipped. I'm not capable of doing this. I've had all these different moments where I'm like, the soul's been in my face, right? And I've debated. I've honestly debated with God. I'm not ready to not do this. We're in Oklahoma last week. My mom rents this lake house, and we're at this lake house, and I go to put Tucker to bed. And I look up on the wall, and this is the picture I saw. It's like this anchor, and it's got Hebrews 6:19 written on this picture hanging up on the wall, and I'm sitting there, oh, fine, we'll talk about the soul, all right? We're going to talk about the soul. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to wrestle with this idea, what is the soul, and why does God care so much about our souls? And so today is really going to be just an introduction. We're going to talk about this. But for the next few weeks, I want to challenge myself. I want to challenge us. I want to challenge you to make the caring of your soul a priority this year. That you would look deep inside yourself, deep inside your soul, and you would tend to it. You would keep it. You would grow it. You would mature it. You would wise it. You would do all these things. And so that's what we're going to do today. In the meantime, we're going to sing some songs. We're going to praise. We're going to worship. And we're going to thank God for who He is, what He's done, and who He continues to be in our lives. So let's stand together and let's continue to sing. So what is the soul? What is the soul? To me, that's the question that we get to wrestle with and that we get to look at. And this is the verse. This is the verse that grabbed me. The writer of Hebrews says this in chapter 6, verse 19. It says, we have this as a sure and a steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope. And who is that hope? We just sang about Him. Who is that hope? Jesus is that hope, right? And He says, I'm that anchor. And He makes it very clear that that's who He is and what He is. And we have this sure, we have this steadfast hope. And so what is the soul? The soul is that thing that combines, it integrates, it connects. It connects our will, which our will is our intentions. And it connects our mind, which is our thoughts and our feelings and our values and all these type of things, our conscience. But it also connects our body, which is, our face, our body language. And we know a lot about body language, right? You can say to your wife, how you doing? And she could say, fine. Right? That's a part of us. And that's that piece. It connects all those things, our will and our body and our emotions and our mind. It connects our language and our actions into one. And so as I've been trying to wrap my head around what is a soul, what is the soul? I think for today, this little piece of the message, it might be easier for me to tell you what the soul is not. All right? And then that's, again, believe me here, I don't know for sure everything I'm talking about. And so work with me this morning as I communicate the best I can. I know what the soul is not. And one of the things that I know the soul is not self. The soul is not self. Does that make sense? We use this word self so much. Self and soul are not the same. I would even argue that maybe we've exchanged the word soul for the word self in a lot of different ways and aspects. That we've exchanged the word soul for this word self. Dallas Willard, who is somebody I've been reading about in this concept of soul, he says this: the most important thing about you is not the things you achieve. The most important thing about you is not the things that you achieve. It is the person you become. And the reason he says this is because you can't take your achievements with you when this is over. And since you can't take your accomplishments, you can't take your achievements with you, all you have to take is your soul. And soul is so much more than self. Self is wrapped up into these accomplishments and these achievements and all these different type of things. Yet as we start a new year, how many of you have started working on your self? And so often in the midst of trying to work on our self, guess what we neglect? The soul. Have you seen the infomercials for New Year's resolutions? To work on your self, right? I mean, all of these things to work on yourself, self-improvement this and self-improvement that, and you need to self-improve this and these self-improvement resolutions, these self-improvement books to read, these self-improvement apps to download to make yourself improve. But I'd argue, what about your soul? What about your soul? Self-improvement, everything, but what about your soul? The more we focus on self, the more we sometimes neglect our souls. Even Sigmund Freud, who I would never quote in a sermon, he even said, treatment of the psyche is treatment of the soul. He understood it's all connected. You can't have one without the other. And so the focus on myself apart from God means I'm losing awareness of what matters most. If I'm focusing on myself apart from who God is, I'm going to lose awareness of what matters most. And what am I telling you matters most today? Your soul. But to focus on my soul means to look at my life through the eyes of God, under His care, and through the connection that I have with Him. And as I begin to do that, I begin to see myself clearly. Yet our culture says, if you're empty, refill yourself, right? If you're stressed, take care of yourself, right? If you're on a job interview, believe in yourself, right? If you're choosing a particular lifestyle, whatever that lifestyle might be, you need to freely express yourself. If you're criticized by anything or anybody, then you need to love yourself. If you're on a date, be. Do you hear it? It's all of our culture telling us, care about yourself. I Googled self-care. I just Googled self-care because I thought this would be interesting. This is what I found. Keep calm. Practice self-care. How you treat yourself is how you're inviting the world to treat you. Self-care is like chocolate. You can never have enough. Someone named Audre Lorde, I don't even know who that is, said self-care is not about being self-indulgent. It's about self-preservation. Another quote I heard, be your own beloved and create self-care policies. You are enough. You can't heal unless you take care of. Self-care is the only thing that will make you thrive. I mean, these are Google quotes on self-care. Are you with me? I'm not against self-care. Please don't hear me saying that today. As a matter of fact, I think we need to take care of ourselves also. But what I'm trying to argue and what I'm trying to say today is that I want to challenge you in 2015, do not neglect your soul. Don't neglect your soul. Self is a standalone, do-it-yourself, strong enough. The soul though, it reminds us that we were not made for ourselves. The soul reminds us that we were made for so much more than what the world can offer us, than what we can see, than what we can touch, than the success that can go on our resume, than the achievements that go on our award list. I mean, we know this stuff too, because we don't sing the old hymn, "Then sings myself." We don't sing that. We say, "Then sings my" what? My soul, or the contemporary song, "Jesus, lover of myself." What is it? Soul. We know this stuff. We know it. We can't neglect the soul. We can't neglect the soul, because sooner or later, yourself and your world that is wrapped around yourself, it will fall apart. It will come and break into pieces. There will be storms. There will be life challenges. They're going to come your way. You cannot avoid these things. What then will you have, self? What then will you have? If all you do is care about yourself in 2015, and when the storm comes, whether it's in January, February, March, or April, or maybe even at the end of the year, when the storm comes, what then will you do? What then will you have left? All that will matter is your soul. A man named Horatio Spafford. He was a lawyer, and he invested almost everything that he had into real estate. He lived in Chicago, and he was married to a woman named Anna. They had 5 children, 4 girls and 1 boy, 1 son. Their son died of scarlet fever in 1870. In 1871, Horatio Spafford lost everything he had in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. He invested all of his money, everything, into real estate, and the real estate got burned, right? He had nothing. He lost everything. His business, he lost his money, he had lost his investments, he lost everything. And then in 1873, Spafford sent his wife and his 4 daughters to England. He wanted to try to take time and to rebuild his estate and rebuild his business and rebuild all of these things in his life. He wanted to reestablish himself. But a few days after sending his wife and his 4 daughters to England, Spafford received a telegram. And the telegram said this: "Saved alone, what shall I do?" Saved alone, what shall I do? See, the ship that Anna and the 4 girls was on, it wrecked. And the only one who didn't die was Anna, the wife. The 4 daughters all perished in the sea. Spafford got on a ship and he went to England to be with his wife, Anna. And as his ship passed the place where just a few weeks before the ship wrecked, where his 4 daughters perished in the sea, he wrote these words: "When peace, like a river, attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul." Life storms are going to come. And what will matter most is not how well you've taken care of yourself and what you've done to improve yourself. What will matter when the storms come is your what? God, as we talk about the soul today, there's broken souls here. There's lost souls here. There's hurting souls. There's hardened souls. There's confused souls. God, there's all sorts of different types of souls among us in this very room. And God, one thing I know for sure, you're here. And you're near. And no matter what condition our soul is in, you want nothing more than to heal it, to grow it, to soften it, to straighten it out. God, you want nothing more than for our soul to be right with you. And so, God, I don't know for sure what condition or what challenges or what struggles that each person has, but what I know is you care. You care deeply. God, you care so much that you were willing to do whatever it took to prove and to show that your love is great. God, you came in the form of your Son, Jesus, to redeem our souls, to heal our souls, to fix our souls. And for that, God, we are so incredibly grateful. God, I pray today for the people who are struggling, because we live in a world that tells us that we need to be about the self, and we need to be consumed with the self, and your achievement and your success and your wealth are the most important things. And God, I pray today that you would show them there's more to this life than those things. God, I pray today for the people who come because they're scared. Their health is declining and they have scary reports from the doctors, and God, they don't know what to do. God, I pray that you would give them peace in the midst of the storm, that God, you would be their anchor, the anchor of their souls, so that they wouldn't be tossed back and forth by their circumstance. God, I pray today for the marriages that are hurting, the marriages that are breaking, the marriages, God, that so many things have interfered with. I pray, Father, for reconciliation, for redemption, for peace. God, I pray for you to help us understand. Help us understand things that God, I know are nearly impossible for us to comprehend. God, today I just pray, thanking you for who you are, and that regardless of our need, you are here, you're present, and you want to do something about it. God, you're with us every step of the way. Thank you for that confidence. Thank you for your Son, Jesus. In his name I pray. Amen. This is going to be the last piece that I talk about, and I hope you see what we're trying to do today. We're trying to give you just a piece and a time to be able to reflect, a time to look, and a time to see what condition your soul might be in, where you might be, and look at your soul. I know we don't do this very often. I mean, this isn't something that we normally do. This isn't our normal order of service, and I'm trying to keep up, so I'm with you, all right? But we want to be intentional about giving you the opportunity to pause and to look inside yourself and to identify the condition of your own soul, because the most important thing about you is not the things you achieve, but the person you become. That's what's most important. And our issue is that we are taught to pay attention to an awful lot of things, but we're not taught how to pay attention to what matters most. And if what matters most is our soul, then we're not taught how to pay attention to that much. We are taught to focus on and pay attention onto the accomplishments and the successes and the achievements and the fame and the wealth. And we don't focus much on... I'm distracted, just a second. I'm better. It's like walking out of the bathroom with toilet paper on your shoe. All right, back to it. Come on, focus, people, would you? But we don't focus much on who we're becoming. So how do we tend to our souls when the world has given us so many distractions? I want to look at a parable in Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4. If you need a Bible, raise your hand and our ushers will get you one. But it's interesting to me because Mark, he's got a short little book, and this is the very first parable that he puts into this book. The very first one, which could mean that he thinks it's a pretty important parable. Mark chapter 4, I want to read it with us together. It says this, "And Jesus began to teach beside the sea, and a very large crowd gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat in it into the sea. And the whole crowd was beside the sea on the land, and he was teaching them many things in parables. And in his teachings he said to them this, 'Listen, behold, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and they devoured it. Other seed fell on rocky ground where it did not have much soil, and immediately it sprang up, since it had no depth of soil. And when the sun rose, it was scorched, and since it had no root, it withered away. Other seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no grain. And other seeds, they fell into good soil and produced grain, growing up and increasing and yielding 30-fold and 60-fold and 100-fold. And he said, 'He who has ears, let him hear.'" Here's what I find interesting about this parable. There's two constants, and then there's one inconsistent. All right? There's two consistents, there's one inconsistent. The two consistents are this. The first one is there's a planter. There's a planter, a sower. And he's constantly doing what? Sowing seed. He's throwing seed. He's always throwing seed. He's constantly sowing seed, right? That's the constant that we see. And so it's not so much about the seed. Sometimes we take this parable and we talk about, was it good seed or was it bad seed? That's not what Jesus is addressing here. He's not talking about the condition of the seed. He's talking about the consistency of the sower, that the sower is always casting and sowing and throwing what? Seed. Given any chance at all, the seed wants to grab some sort of ground, and it wants to produce a root, and it wants to grow. And the sower is throwing seed, hoping that he can give every seed a chance to grow. The sower, the planter, he's continually sowing, he's throwing the seed, and he's generous with the seed, and he throws it everywhere. And so we've got this seed and we've got this sower, and they're consistent and they're constant. But what's not constant, what's not consistent is the soil. The soil changes in this parable. And for our topic today, maybe we should change the word soil to soul. Change the word soil to soul. And in it, we're going to see three particular types of souls, aren't we? Really four, but if I give you the fourth, then your temptation is going to say, well, I'm the good soil, and so I'm good to go. So for the sake of conversation, not to give you the out, let's only give you the three so that you can wrestle with which one you might go to. I probably struggle with two out of these three. All right? The first one's this, the hard soul. Some seeds fell on a path, on hard ground. You're in the Middle East. The sun is drying up the ground. It's being walked on by the farmers and by the sheep herders and by the sheep and the animals and all these type of things. So the ground is hard. It's beaten down. They're walking to water. They're finding food, pasture to eat. The ground is being beaten. It's hardened down. And souls get that way, don't they? Don't souls get that way? Don't they get hard sometimes? I mean, especially when you've been hurt, right? Or disappointed. Maybe you've been let down. And what happens? Sometimes our souls, they become cynical and judgmental. Sometimes they become suspicious and a little bit bitter. Nah, that doesn't happen. And hard souls are often focused on themselves. Have you ever noticed that? They're focused on themselves. Hard souls tell us to think more about ourselves, to guard ourselves, to protect ourselves, to create boundaries for ourselves, to watch yourself. And hard souls get wrapped up in the hurt they experienced more than the pain they inflict. We have hard souls sometimes, don't we? The other one is this. Did you notice it? Shallow souls. Shallow souls. Some of the seed fell on rocky soil, likely a bunch of rocks under just a little bit of topsoil. And as soon as the root gained traction, it got stopped. by the rocks. The soil wasn't good enough. The seed sprouted and it had grown until the sun arose, and the sun arose, and then the plant, what happened to it? It withered away, it scorched up, it burned up because the soil was too shallow. Our souls sometimes, they're superficial. They lack depth. The soul, it needs depth, it needs deepness. The soul is the deepest part of who you are. It's the deepest part, it's the innermost part, and I can't even begin to explain the soul, but one of the things I know is the soul is so deep. And God talks about it so much in Scripture. David, how many Psalms have you read where David is talking about his soul, the condition of his soul, the soul this, the soul that? And shallow souls, they focus mostly on themselves, they focus on their circumstances. They look at the world and they value what the world values, success and achievement. And deep souls, though, man, they can connect. Deep souls, they connect and they understand and they empathize with other souls. But a shallow soul, you know what? The shallow soul goes through the motions. They go through the motions. They keep the pace. They roll with it. A shallow soul goes through the motions, but a deep soul, you know what a deep soul does? It asks questions. Deep questions. Thoughtful questions. There's a third type of souls that we see from this parable, and it's the cluttered soul. Some of the seed, they fell among the thorns, you know? And the seeds grow and they get choked out by the rest, and the thorns, they truly represent our lives sometimes. Our worries, the pursuit of fruitless ventures, the chase of all the things that the world considers important, busyness, crazy schedules, hurriedness. These things, they choke out the soul. They choke out the soul. Cluttered souls attached to wrong things. They grow on to wrong things, and cluttered souls think the clutter gives them life. That's what's crazy. That as the seed falls among the thorns, you know what the seeds think? The ground thinks? They're giving me life. When actually they're taking life. They're choking life. And a cluttered soul, it longs for success. It longs for fame. And it longs for reputation and social acceptance. And they keep their schedules really busy and hectic and not a lot of margin to function and to work within God's world. The sower is sowing seeds constantly. The sower is continually sowing seeds. God is constantly sowing seeds on your soul. And He wants them to capture your soul and grow within your soul, to sprout within your soul. He wants to change your life. He wants to drastically adjust your life. And the sower wants every seed to have a chance. The seed just needs the right soil. The seed needs the right soul to grow. Whatever soil you might be, this is what I want you to know. There's hope for you. And you know why? Because the sower is constantly sowing seed. And all it needs is just a little softness in that hardened path. A little soft spot. And that seed will grab that soft spot and it'll root and it will grow. All it needs is a little freeway in the midst of a lot of thorns to find some soil, to grab the soil and to grow. All the seed needs is a little depth in your shallowness, and the seed will grow. What you need to understand is this. This is what I want you to know. You are a soul, and you are made by God. You are made for God, and you are made to need God. You are a soul made by God, you are made for God, and you are made to need God. And that's why the seeds are continually being sown. He's not giving up on you. He's not throwing you out to pasture. He's willing to do whatever it takes to find the right soil, to cast the right seed so that it will capture your heart and grow, your soul and grow. All it takes is focus. All it takes is choice to give a seed a chance to grow. That's all it takes. He wants to give every seed a chance to find root. Nothing more, nothing less. But here's what I want you to ask yourself. What is the condition of my soul? Is it hard? Is it cluttered? Is it shallow? And what are you willing to do this month, this year, in your life now to change your soul? If your soul is the most important thing about you and it's the only thing that you can take into eternity with you, then what are you doing about the condition of your soul? And that's why for the next few weeks, we're going to break this down a little bit more. We're going to try to understand it a little bit more. We're going to look at some really interesting interactions with Jesus again. We're going to look at a psalm, a prayer that David prays, and it's almost a crazy prayer. But he prays it, and it's all about his soul. What is the condition of your soul? And what are you willing to do about the most important thing about yourself, your soul? We're going to sing another song prior to taking communion. And I want you to think about your condition, your soul. I want you to think about where you're at and who you are. It's interesting because Peter wrote this really good little verse, and I found it as I was preparing for Christmas Eve. It says this: though you have not seen him, you love him. And though you do not now see him, you believe in him, and you rejoice with joy that is inexpressible and filled with glory, obtaining the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. This idea of salvation of our souls, it's continual. We're always working it out. We're always tending to the ground. We're always doing what we have to do. But my question is this: what is the condition of your soul? Think about that as we sing this song and prepare for communion time.